Please feel free to put your questions to Mr. Shyam Saran, please.
Why do you think tropics will be affected most because of the climate change?
Because we already are in a high temperature zone. Therefore, the tipping point in terms of the sort of consequences that we are talking about because of thermal, increase, are likely to be more in tropical zones. We are already facing this in some parts of India. If you go, for example, to the Himalayas, where apple was growing at 7,000 feet, now apple can grow only at 9,000 feet. You see vegetation changes and a lot of the Himalayan range. India, as you know, is heavily dependent upon water sources from the Himalayan glaciers. If as a result of temperature change, that ecology changes, then you might have very major changes in your whole water supply situation. So, tropical zones, if you look at the IPCC report, you will see that when they are looking at impacts, and they have categorization, the impacts in the tropical zones are by far the most serious.
Very good presentation, sir. I am appreciating. And I want to know 2001, 2 millennium, good governance and good life. Industrial evolution and evolution theory brought a comfort life, and now information technology, only 2 decades. These issues denying in the name of aesthetic life natural needs of billions of people in India by international sulaf. Now our railway ministry is coming from natural resources denying with a hygienic look. About what way these climatic challenges and energy security will benefit billions of poor in the country and their good life. Science and technology only 2 centuries. But documented history and governance available 2 millennium. And 20 years, 2 decades. Information technology made colonialism in virtual way, and now we are fearing imperial slavery in India. For that, what way we will make use Nias and Jan Tata and JRD Tatas and old Birla's industrial principles?
There is no inevitability about our falling behind. I think there is enough resources, enough talent available in this country to be able to meet these challenges. So let me give you an example, because Dr. Baldev Raj was associated with that in one of the. So we came to the conclusion that for the foreseeable future, it may be very difficult for India to make a very dramatic change in its reliance on coal for producing power. And when we were dealing with this issue, we found that we had something like 100,000 megawatts of coal-based thermal power, which was in the pipeline. Now that's quite a large requirement in terms of coal, but it is also would have a major impact in terms of emissions. So as a result of that work, we came up with a 9th mission for the Climate Change Action Plan, which was the Clean Coal Mission. Essentially to look at how you can meet both the requirement of energy security as well as climate change through a possible application of technology. So it was agreed that we should be looking at the application of what I think you people know better than I do, ultra supercritical technology, which would raise the efficiency of coal burning to something like 48%, 49% from subcritical levels of maybe 32%, 33%. If you do that, then every ton of coal produces more power because it is more efficient. And also, by the same token, the intensity, carbon intensity goes down because of the efficiency level. Only thing was that it was very expensive. Secondly, it seemed as if we did not have that technology. So when we had 3-4 brainstorming sessions which were organized by the principal scientific advisor to the Prime Minister, that if this is the challenge, do all of you, CSIR laboratories, premier research institutions like the Indira Gandhi Center, IITs, academic institutions, some of the private sector companies, public sector companies, do we have an answer, possible answer in India? Essentially, I'm simplifying, essentially, as far as I understood, the challenge came down to, do we have the technology to deal with very high temperature applications? That is going up to 900 degrees centigrade maybe. Do we have technology in terms of, say, metallic alloys, which can not only deal with very high temperatures, but also very high pressures because of this ultra-supercritical technology? And essentially the companies told us we do not have that technology, although it is being developed in places like Germany, in places like China, Japan, but in India we do not have that. Even the supercritical technology plants were mostly, that technology was imported from outside. So we can't go up to ultra-supercritical. The man who found the answer was Dr. Baldev Raj. He said in the fast breeder reactor program, they routinely deal with very high temperatures. They have already done, quite indigenously developed very, very high quality alloys precisely to deal with this. Yes, we need to prove that technology in the thermal sphere. You cannot mechanically just, you have to demonstrate how this can be applied in the thermal area. And that is what we did. So we have an 880 megawatt demonstration plant which is under construction. So what I'm trying to say is that we should not underestimate actually the pool of scientific technical knowledge which is available here in India. What you need is, how do we pull this together? So we were able to pull this together by having this kind of brainstorming. This was probably the first time that many of even the CSIR heads met together in one room. So this is something which we have to think, how do we get together this knowledge that is pooled, which is there. The other is, even in Bangalore, if you look at, how many MNCs have their state-of-the-art R&D facilities here? How many Indians are working on cutting-edge technologies there? Now, if you ask me, that's very good, but at the same time, isn't that a resource that you should be mobilizing for your own, meeting your own challenges? So that's why I said, there is no inevitability about falling behind. It is more a question of how do you manage to bring things together. And whether it is energy security, whether it is, moving into new forms of fuels, the expertise is there. I mean, that was my experience in the few years that I was dealing with the nuclear issue, when I was dealing with the climate change issue. I discovered that we are not even aware of how much knowledge and resources are available within the country itself.
Please keep your question as precise as possible.
Thank you very much for the very informative lecture. I would like to understand more about the carbon credit system which was discussed in Kyoto Protocol, and what is the present state of that? And also, just one more question is that the IGPCC, which overemphasized on the emission data, which was a news, whether it was correct or not.
The IPCC reports, number one, they commission very large number of papers on different issues. There may be 2,000, 3,000 papers. But then there is a intergovernmental process where governments or scientists representing governments go through that material, sift through that material, and they come up with a consensus. So that assessment is an assessment which has been arrived at through a very, very rigorous peer review process, not only with scientists, but because governments are involved, there is that input into that as well. Naturally, when you are making predictions and where your data may not necessarily be fully comprehensive, much more data, for example, is available from the Western countries. Less data may be available if you go to Africa, perhaps intermediate when you come to Asian countries. So there is a problem of availability of data, which also the IPCC tries to overcome over a period of time. So there are those kind of limitations which then give you the possibility only to indicate a range. What could be a possible range of impacts? Which is why I said 25% to 40%, depending upon how, is this the best case scenario or is it the worst case scenario? If we are further down the line towards catastrophe, then we must do 40. If it is not so much, maybe 25. So we cannot come up with absolute reductions and say, this is correct, that is incorrect. Is it entirely accurate? We will never know until actually something happens. But the fact is that, these are people who know their subject and have done a huge amount of work. And I think what they are telling us needs to be taken very seriously.
There was a question there. Just with the red shirt, yes.
Given the damage that they have done till now, would you say, sir, that the attitude of developed countries on emission norms is more dangerous than what we now call terrorism, given that terrorism only targets small isolated communities and regions, whereas this attitude challenges the whole humanity, whole planet in fact?
Well, that's a value judgment. So I would not like to get into, whether or not this is more dangerous than that. Let's accept that this is something which is, even if the industrialized advanced nations have a bigger responsibility, yet it is a danger to all humanity. Therefore, merely blaming them is not going to get you very far. You have to also try to construct a global regime, as I said, which is based on what the UNFCCC says, common but differentiated responsibility and respective capabilities. This is a consensus in the UNFCCC, which means what? I recognize historical responsibility, therefore I have to do more. I recognize that I have more resources than developing countries, therefore I need to do more, whether in terms of financial resources or technology. But does not mean that India has the right to spew as much carbon as it likes into the atmosphere. That's not the issue. We also have a responsibility. What I tried to point out was that happily for India, both the energy security aspect as well as what is required for climate change actually come together. And therefore, in a sense, more reason for us to make that transition, not just for climate change, but even for energy security itself.
Good evening, sir. I am Dr. H. Parmesh, pediatric pulmonologist. 22nd of May this year, Margaret Chan, director of WHO, while addressing WHO Assembly, she stressed the climate change, the impact climate change, and air pollution and health-related issues. Sure. She appealed all the delegates to influence the government to sign the memorandum in December in France. What would you expect, sir? Our country going to sign that memorandum, or any reservation in that one?
No, I mean, I think every sort of warning bell. I'm not speaking as a government official because I'm not. What I'm saying is that as a concerned citizen, I would hope that as many warning bells are being rung as possible. Because my sense is, even though I'm not a scientist, but my sense is that we are actually facing, as I said, a kind of a planetary emergency. Now, if you're talking about health, there is a direct link between climate change and health as well. If temperature rise takes place, a lot of the bugs and viruses and bacteria also become active, and that has an impact on. And there is a pollution aspect as well, because use of fossil fuels also has a pollution dimension. Look at the respiratory diseases that we now find all over India because of pollution. And as I said, we need to be able to think through some of these issues. Take a very simple example. If you say that aspirational India wants to be like the United States of America, wants to be like an European country, and several times in the climate change negotiations, I myself have argued that, you cannot say that you have a right to affluence and I don't. But the fact is, United States of America has a car ownership density today of 800 per thousand. Europe has 600 to 700 per thousand. India currently has 30 to 40 per thousand. If India were to reach the level even half of Europe, all the oil in the world would not be sufficient. Second, where will you park your cars? Where are the highways to run those cars? You already have traffic gridlock all over the place. Now, people have a right to mobility. People do not have a right to a private car. But if you look at how your economy is today oriented, it punishes public transport. It, in fact, gives in a sense, a implicit subsidy to private transport. Now, unless you change the way you think about these things, you will end up by what we were talking earlier. Look at the level of inequality, because it is only a small number of people who will be able to afford that kind of affluence. You have to live in very small islands to be able to sustain that, while the rest of the population will have to be in severe deprivation. Can you sustain a society through that? No. Now, we are not looking ahead. Now, unless those decisions are made today, it may be too late. So that's why I'm saying that the kind of seriousness of the situation that we are facing is simply not getting through to people.
Sujata.
Good evening, sir. Thank you for your eloquent lecture. We all agree and understand also there is a huge carbon pool, and to reduce that, stopping it or adding more component into it is one way. Another way is to reduce it, we need to do some carbon sequestration in the natural way, involving stakeholder. So is there any effort consciously we are giving into it, or what is the scenario from government sides? I would like to know.
Carbon sequestration or carbon capture and storage is something that has been talked about for many years. And as you know, it has actually been practiced for oil recovery. Depleted oil wells, you actually pump in, carbon emissions, and you can get additional oil. So the basic technology is available. Now, first of all, you have to find appropriate storage places, which are usually underground caverns or fissures underneath the surface, and then you have to bring the emissions from where they are emitted to where they can be stored. Now, I'm only talking about a study done in India. Would CCS be possible in India? Forget about the cost first. I'll come to the cost later. Would this be a feasible exercise? So most of the coal-based thermal power plants, where they are located, and some of the areas which were identified by the Geological Survey of India as possible storage areas, their distance is average distance, if you take, is actually quite long. Therefore, if you are pumping first from the plant, then pumping through a pipeline, then pumping inside, the net energy is sometimes actually more than what you would have saved. So, what is the point? Secondly, the cost today of CCS, if you have a 1 billion, if you have a 1,000 megawatt coal-based thermal power plant, which costs, say, about $1 billion, if you fit it with CCS, it will cost you another $1 billion. Who will pay that cost? If somebody says that through the climate change regime, India will be given $1 billion or even $800 million or even $500 million for each plant that it has for putting it in CCS, okay, but they are not prepared to give you even a penny.
Can we keep because there are many, so
We'll-
So myself Rangarajan from AMD. Actually, the Kyoto Protocol was introduced in 1992 and implemented in 1997. Thereafter, it was introduced by United Nations itself and it was overruled by them itself. And in the second phase, actually, with 4 slogans, as you told, that is the mitigation, adaptation of the climate, finance and technology. According to that, again they introduced the same policies and they tried, again they brought even USA also and other countries also to increase from 25 to 45% to bring the temperature down for 2 degrees centigrade. Other than USA, and how many countries are now actually adopting these policies, sir, that I want to know. Globally, how many countries are?
No, as I mentioned, that if you take those contributions which have already been announced, and as I mentioned, US has announced 26 to 28% by 2025, with 2005 as the base year. 25 to 40% was with 1990 as the base year. So there is already, it's not really comparable. Most other countries, if you take, for example, the European Union, they had committed themselves to 30% reduction with 1990 as the base year by 2020. Now Europe says, because of the fact that Germany has gone off nuclear, there is a spike in coal-based power in Germany. So it is likely that there will be a kind of a slippage there as well. So if we are looking at existing contributions, announced contributions, and if we are looking at what is anticipated from particularly high emission countries like say Australia, Canada, then we are very far away from meeting that 2 degrees centigrade. They have, of course, very high per capita emissions, but in the global terms, they are small. So, I mean, if you are looking at the macro picture, their contribution to emissions is not so high. You know that Saudi Arabia has time and again said that if we have to, if oil as a source of energy is reduced, then you must compensate us. So.
Good evening, sir. You mentioned that the investment which is going into the exploration of oil and gas, it is so much, and they have committed so much. Compared to that, for renewable energy sources, not that much, 1/4 of that. As far as we are concerned in India, we don't have much of oil and gas. Isn't it a good strategy for us to invest heavily? I would not say heavily, invest judiciously in the renewable energy sources, there should be some kind of an agreement on the part of the government. There should be a strategy. Is there anything like that so that we can leapfrog into this kind of thing? Anyway, we don't have oil and gas, and anyway, this carbon capping is there. So what would be the best thing for the government to do?
As I mentioned, that it makes sense for us to invest in that transition because of, if you're looking at a somewhat medium and longer term frame, this is what will ensure India's energy security, because if you have 90% of the oil which is imported and most of it imported from a Middle East which is in political turmoil, doesn't to me strike as contributing to India's energy security. So you should make that change. But it means that not only should you be investing in renewable energy, but you should also be investing very heavily in R&D for doing that leapfrog that you are talking about. Much of what we are investing in renewable energy is unfortunately going in the same direction as what has happened with, say, telecommunications, what has happened with, say, mobiles, or with power sector. I've been trying to explain that one of the biggest assets that you have in India is scale, because if you are 900 million mobiles, I mean the market is giving you a opportunity to actually make those mobiles, invest in R&D for better mobiles. Instead, what has happened? Instead, much of your mobile telephone market is all dominated by foreign companies. Who is doing R&D in mobile or the next generation mobile, next generation smartphone? No. It's the same story with power equipment. If there is massive expansion taking place in your power sector, yes, fossil fuel based power sector, that particular expansion is not being met through a expansion of manufacturing in India itself. Most of that is coming from China. So we are not able to leverage the scale of market which very few countries have to actually bring about a major change, both in terms of production capacity, but more importantly in terms of being able to actually invest in the R&D which will give you that leapfrogging which is possible. I mentioned the example that Dr. Baldev Raj was involved in. That is leapfrogging. That is, you are husbanding what you have to make that leap. But, like everything, that requires strategy. It requires people being able to see, okay, in 5 years' time, where do I want to be? In 10 years' time, where do I want to be? Once you have a clearer picture of where you want to be, then you can start, putting the, pieces together. But that is not what is happening. It is mostly ad hoc kind of decisions which are being taken, which will not add up to what you need.
I know there are many who want to ask. In fact, the hands are increasing as the time passes. But we have to also be conscious about the time. I request Dr. M. R. Srinivasan, he wishes to make some remarks.
Thank you, Dr. Baldev Raj. First of all, I want to compliment Mr. Saran for a brilliant overview of the situation on climate change negotiations as of now. I want to make just a few brief points, not necessarily to start off a debate. First, importance of multidisciplinary approach to problems. Actually, it was started in India by Dr. Baba and Dr. Sarabhai.
Absolutely.
And slowly over a period of time, others are also catching up, but not adequately. We are still operating too much in silos. So I think this is an issue that we have to tackle up front. Second, the issue of, should we commit suicide because we see no way out? Mr. Saran answered the question very well. I do want to tell you that there are areas in atomic energy and space and perhaps in defense and so forth that a lot of good work is being done, but there's very little technology transfer within the country. And even the private sector is very happy to go to some foreigner than to go to the Indian labs and see how they can prototype, an idea already developed at the lab level, and then get on to productionizing. So this is another big gap in the country. Third, a small amendment to Sharan's observation. Many people have tended to say that India is coal rich. It's not so. 90% of the global coal reserves are in the US, China, Russia, Poland, Ukraine, Australia and South Africa. The rest of the 10% is in other parts of the world. So at a global level, our total reserves of 250 billion tons in place, not very large. Nevertheless, many people tend to think it's very abundant, etc. So I think even burning away what we have as a fuel excessively is not a good thing. The next issue I want to make is, on technology, incidentally, for this international thermonuclear experimental reactor called ITER, which is a joint project between US, Russia, European Union, Japan, China, Korea and India, where all of us are contributing both money and technology. India has been given the job of making what is called as a cryostat, one of the largest cold vessels to withstand liquid helium temperature at very high vacuum. And this is being done, fabricated in India by Larsen and Toubro. So you know there is an enormous, on the one hand, talent and expertise which nobody knows. And as Mr. Saran is saying, we keep importing turbine generators and boilers from China, all mobile phones from China, electronics, everything from China, etc., etc. So there is a huge disconnect. So although the initial proposition of our Prime Minister, Make in India, sounded quite good, I would say it must be Make in India using Indian designs and Indian technology. Otherwise, we will just be another third-rate country. Now, where is China today? It's able to offer its own technology across the board. Of course, they also work with technology that they initially obtained from elsewhere. But they have managed to go ahead, at least keep level and even move ahead. This India has failed to do. See, we got into the motor car business such a long time ago. There isn't a single motor car, of course Nano is there, yes, which says the Indian flag we can wave. So this is a huge area of non-performance collectively with the country. But I want to ask a more limited question to Dr. Saran. That is, at the national level or even at the international level, can we consider non-carbon incentives and carbon tax in order to see that you first of all punish carbon emissions at the national level and encourage non-carbon options? Has this been discussed around in the global negotiations, and can there even be a global consensus in that? And the other issue is the so-called carbon trading is a bit of a fraud, and I do not know if that fraud will continue because it's really not all that even ethical really. It's a bit of a fraudulent transaction. And then the other issue that I do want to mention is, however much we may say that we want the developed rich countries to give finances and technology, they will of course keep on playing their own games. In the end, a country like India will not benefit from this because they will exclude India in any case. They are saying you are too big, you are already well enough endowed, etc., and you can be on your own. I think we can of course use it as a negotiating tactic with them, but we will never really succeed in getting much out of it. We must really learn to stand on our own. But I think I'm quite sure Dr. Saran realizes it, but collectively this country doesn't realize it. And it hasn't really faced the challenge. Look, it's like asking the rich man to give up his wealth to make the poor man a little more prosperous. That'll never happen. It hasn't happened in history. So why should it be any different in climate matters? Thank you.
Well, there is nothing to show that there could be a international consensus on raising the price of carbon either through a tax or through regulatory measures to a high enough level that would enable a global shift from carbon-based fuels to renewable. And the trading that you are talking about, yes, it is a bit of a fraud. I mean, we have benefited from that fraud, so I suppose this is something that will probably continue. But in 2009, when we were at Copenhagen, the price of carbon in the European market was about 32 to 33 euros per ton, per unit as they call it. I'm not quite sure exactly whether it is a ton. Today, it is running at 6 to 7 rupees EU per ton. Why should any company make a shift? So we are seeing no effort on the part of countries which are large users of fossil fuels to actually make that change. And recently, because of the fall in oil prices and the very sharp increase in gas production in the US, whatever little incentive we've had earlier, even that is now diminished. So there is really not much incentive for any country, including India. Now you see how dramatically our imports of oil have gone down. Purely because of the price decrease, it has been halved. So you do not have, market is not delivering what you need in order to make that shift. So it can only come through a decision of governments. And any kind of a global regime, at the end of the day, can only work if it is seen as being equitable. Because those who feel that this is not fair will not deliver. So this is the dilemma which we are facing, because essentially what the global regime which is coming into being is a very weak regime, because it is only a weak regime which everybody can agree upon. So I do not see, pessimistic as it sounds, I do not see any kind of, in the near future, any kind of movement towards that. Unfortunately, it would appear that unless there is actually a crisis and a calamity, maybe people won't wake up. That's the situation which we face. And nationally, no, I don't see nationally that there is a focus on these issues. Rhetorically, yes, everybody talks about how climate change is a major challenge. But when it comes down to actually looking at, okay, if this is a challenge, how do we go about dealing with it? Very little.
So friends, I know that there is a vote of thanks by my colleague Dr. Arun Vishwanathan, but I can't stop myself by saying it has been a brilliant evening. We have not found the solution, but we have heard from a person who had the experience of pain and pleasure of this big challenge. And I believe in Mahatma Gandhi, who said that only those can speak with conviction who have lived it and who have experienced it. So I don't think there is a better person in India or in many parts of the world who can speak with honesty and conviction, both parts. So I am not giving vote of thanks, but I am expressing the pleasure of being here for your talk along with all of you. So I give it back to Dr. Rajini.
Very passionate lecture and discussion, sir. As a token of our gratitude and appreciation and thanking you for being here with us today, I request our director, Professor Baldev Raj, to present a certificate and memento for this occasion. I now request my colleague Dr. Arun Vishwanathan to present the vote of thanks.
Thank you, Rajini. I've had the fortune of listening to Ambassador Saran a couple of times in Delhi when he was the Foreign Secretary and later on when he was the Prime Minister's Special Envoy. And every time your talk, sir, has been very scintillating. and has always kept the audience. And we have all, every time, we have learned something from your talk, and we've been forced to think about the issues that you've raised. And this time has not been any different. And I want to, on behalf of all of us and NIAS, thank you for coming, taking the time and coming to NIAS and talking to us on such an important issue. Thank you, sir.